Hey everyone, it's good to see you again. Welcome to Father's House as we continue to do church online and try and reach out to not just people who are already part of the Father's House family, but for those connected to it, those who are not even connected to it normally, but are connecting in at this time. Can I just say, I really appreciate the fact that you are taking time out of your day to watch the videos we're putting out there. And even more than that, you're coming back to us with great words of encouragement to say how much you're getting out of this, how much this is helping you. That really encourages me. My heart is to see people flourish, not just people who go to church, but people everywhere, because I believe in a God that desires to bless us. Whether we love him or follow him or not, his innate desire is to bless, because he is good. He's a good father, and that's a big part of what I personally want to try and communicate to you every time I do this. And in particular, over the next few weeks, I'm going to focus on something that I believe can bring you hope and maybe help you reevaluate some things. If you are a follower of Jesus, you may already think that you know, and if you're not a follower of Jesus, I pray that this will be encouraging you and maybe even encouraging you to try following Jesus. Do you know, I read recently that there are more than 2.4 billion people in the world who claim to be followers of Jesus. 2.4 billion, that's a crazy amount. It's numbers you can't get your head around. Now, if you're listening out there, you might doubt that statistic, especially, you know, if like us, you live in the Western world, where it seems like Christianity has been in decline for years. And in addition to that, granted, there'll be a number of those who responded whenever they did this survey whose faith would be classed as nominal, maybe, you know, just churchgoers every now and then, you know, Easter, Christmas, that sort of thing. But here's a reality as well. Around the world, in countries like South America, China, India, Africa, and many of the other developing countries, more and more people are choosing to follow Jesus. I'm not talking ones or twos, I'm talking thousands, and in some cases millions of people. Do you know what the fastest growing church population in the world is right now? This might surprise you. Iran. Yes, Iran. You know, where to be a Christian and to admit that in public pretty much means certain death, or at the very least very harsh imprisonment. You know, even right now people are being let out of prisons because they can't cope in countries like Iran, and yet Christians are being kept in prison because they're seen as such a threat. Now, I just find that fascinating. And yet the church in Iran is an underground church. It's not something you will have heard of, and it's underground for obvious reasons, because of the persecution. But I hear stories like this and see statistics like that, and for me it begs the question, why would so many people literally risk their lives to follow Jesus when it appears that so few want to follow him in the West? Could it be that the Jesus we have been showing people for many years now in the West is at best a misrepresentation? Could it be that we have allowed religion, misunderstanding, and maybe, if we can be honest enough, some self-interest to affect how we represent Jesus to people? Do you know, you've got to look at the numbers in the West, and it bothers me. It bothers me, and I have to think that and ask the hard question: have we turned more people away from God and his church than we would like to admit? So, how do we rectify this? If we can honestly admit that perhaps we've been turning people away from church and God rather than turning them towards him, how can we rectify this? Well, we have to ask ourselves the questions first. You know, it's pointless at this time, or in any other time for that matter, pointing the finger at other people. You can always blame somebody else. It's always better to look ourselves in the mirror, be honest, and if anything, blame ourselves and then deal with it. So for me, it looks like this. It means firstly admitting that there is a problem, in trying to reach people because we're not showing them who Jesus really is. And secondly, it then means doing our best, once we've realized what the problem is, doing our utmost best to represent Jesus better to everyone, and not just the few that gather in dusty buildings once a week. Now, I need to clarify, in talking about this and making Jesus better known, or his character, what I'm not trying to say here is that I know him better than anyone else. Far be it from that. For me to hold that view would be crazy, for a couple of reasons. One, because at best, to believe that I knew Jesus better than everybody else would make me either delusional or very arrogant, you know, and we've got enough people like that on social media. I don't want to join the list. No, the reason why I want to do this, the reason why I want to admit the problem and try and rectify this is because, I don't know about you, I'm just tired of seeing Jesus misrepresented. I'm tired of the angry mob in Christianity, you know, that points a finger all the time. And yes, we know God is a God of justice, and I can trust him with that. But you know, there's just too much out there that puts people down and misrepresents God. So I'm tired of seeing Jesus misrepresented. And also, because I believe that there are many more people out there who, like me, want hope and need hope. And instead of being turned off God and his church by Christians, we're called to be a light to them instead. So here are some of the questions that I have asked myself, and you might want to consider these questions too. 3 questions. And the first question is this: what kind of God are we actually asking people to follow? You see, if we're going to ask people to go down a path they have not been before, the very least we can do for them is show them someone who can lead them down the path that isn't going to get them lost. I mean, if you're going to go somewhere you don't know, you want to know that the person you are following is the right person and isn't going to lead you off a cliff or down a dead end or into trouble. You want to be following the right person who's going to bring you to the end of the path and into the light. And the second question is this: how may we have misrepresented Jesus? Because that is a question we really need to ask, because if we don't understand how we're representing him, we won't know if we're misrepresenting him. So what's the guideline? What's the baseline? How do we know what is right and what is wrong? Well, this is something I want us to look at over the next couple of weeks and re-examine some of the scriptures we think we know, to get us to think that, hey, maybe, just maybe, we've been getting this wrong and misrepresenting Jesus. And I think when we understand this, it will really help us personally, and to connect with people better and better represent Jesus. The third question is this: what is God really like? Because I believe that when you understand who God really is, what his character truly is, rather than what you may have been shown so far in a poor light, I believe that when you truly understand who God is and how great he is and how good he is, then you may want to follow him too. So this is what I'm aiming to do over the next few weeks, with the videos that you will see online that we'll post out there for you to watch, and please feel free to share them as well with anybody you think it may help. I want to do my best to try and describe who Jesus really is, so that you would want to follow him when you understand that. And I want to start that off with a few Bible verses that show us how good God is. That I could show you thousands, but I'm going to just start off with a few to show you how good God is, but also the flip side of that, how often we, as his followers, have probably got it wrong, messed up, and are sometimes not so good, especially in representing the true character of God. So as I said earlier, I wanted to bring you a couple of Bible verses, and both of these verses or passages are from the Old Testament, which is rather interesting because lots of people like to think that God is nice in the New Testament and not so nice in the Old Testament. And it's the reason why I've chosen a couple of verses from the Old Testament, because what I want to try and show you is that God hasn't changed. God has always been good. God has always had a great heart and wants us to be the same. And maybe it's us that have twisted this view of God and misrepresented him. So let me give you the first one, and it's from Psalm 40, verses 1 to 3. And before I read it out, I love this psalm. I love the Bible. One of the reasons why I like this psalm, and you probably never guess why, it's not for a super spiritual reason. It's because I'm a big U2 fan. And U2 used to sing a song called 40, and it is actually based on Psalm 40. And they always used to finish the concerts with it. And having seen U2 play live many times, I used to look forward to hearing them finish with 40. So there you go. That's just a little aside, but let me read it to you. It says, I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and the mire. He set my feet on a rock, and he gave me a firm place to stand. And then he put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. And many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord. You know why I love this? Because the psalmist, and I can't remember who it is, it could be David, I think it is David, describes a situation where he has got himself into the mess. There has been so many times in my life where I have messed up. I'd love to say that was before I decided to follow Jesus, but that wouldn't be true. I have messed up so many times after as well. But the beauty of God's heart is when we mess up, God's wanting to lift us out of that mess. And David says that he waited and he waited, and God heard his cry. When we cry out to God, I want you to know that God is listening. God answers our cries. He's like that throughout all of the Bible, and you can see that when you look. But what I really like is that this picture of being in a slimy, muddy pit. Don't know if you've ever been in mud, like really slippery mud. It is really difficult even to stand up and get your footing. Imagine if you're in a pit where you've gone down deep and the mud is slippery and slimy. There is no way you can climb out. No way. It's too slippery. You've got yourself into the mess. You've fallen into it, walked into it by mistake. It doesn't really matter. The fact is you're in a mess and you cannot get out. And David describes this, that God reaches down into our mess and he lifts us out because that's his heart. How beautiful is that? But not just that. He lifts us out the mess that we've got ourselves into because of his heart. And then it says he sets my feet on a rock, gives me a firm place to stand. It's like God is saying, look, I'm not just going to get you out of that. I want to put you on a firm foundation for the rest of your life if you will trust me. And when we begin to see how amazing God is, how forgiving, how merciful, and how much he wants us to have a blessed life in following him and to know his true heart, when we get that, and when we get that God is for us, not against us, we become really thankful. We see Jesus for who he is, beautiful, amazing. And it puts a song in our heart. Why have been so many, countless thousands, if not millions of songs written over many centuries about love? When you see how great God is, you fall in love with him. You fall in love with Jesus. And he puts a new song in your mouth. He describes it as a hymn of praise and finishes with many will see and trust in the Lord. If you go out for a meal and you have a fantastic meal, you tell everybody about it. And people end up going to the same restaurant you went because you're passionately telling people about this amazing meal you've had. That's just a meal. How much more a life-changing encounter where you meet the real God and find out that he's not this obnoxious, horrible, distant God with a big stick waiting to beat us up at every mistake we make. But he's the God that reaches down into our mess and lifts us out of the mess we can't get ourselves out of. And not only that, but sets us on solid ground, cleans us up, and wants us to move forward and not fall again. You would tell people about that. You'd even sing about it. That's why I love that passage. Second passage is this, and we're in the Old Testament again, going to the second book of the Bible, Exodus, where the people of Israel are on the move through the desert on that 40-year journey. I want to read to you from chapter 23. If you're taking notes, have a look at verses 1 right through till 9, and you'll get this amazing glimpse of God's heart and his character and how he wants us to be the same. But I just want to read 3 of the verses to you to help bring this on. Verses 4, 5, and then verse 9. Verses 4 and 5 say this: if you come across your enemy's ox or their donkey wandering off, be sure to take it back to him, to your enemy. Or if you see the donkey of someone who hates you falling down under its heavy load, don't leave it there. Be sure you help him with it. Just going to pause there after verses 4 and 5. So this judgmental, horrible God that we've imagined from the Old Testament is saying, look, never mind just your friends or your family, even your worst enemy, the person that you hate the most, if you see the donkey wandering off, take it back. 1, because we're to love our enemies. Didn't Jesus say that? This shows how God's character hasn't changed, and bless those who persecute us. And verse 5, if you see the donkey of someone who hates you falling down under a heavy load, don't leave it there. Be sure to help him with it. What I really like about this isn't just helping your enemy and showing him love regardless of what he shows to you. It's the fact that Jesus is telling us to care for animals as well. So even if the person has really upset you and offended you, betrayed you or whatever, it's not the animal's fault. So at least go and help the animal. And you get a glimpse of God's heart. And it's wonderful. And this, when you see this, you think, this is the kind of God I could follow. Then it gets even better. Verse 9. And I think this is really pertinent in our times. And I know with COVID-19, nobody's talking about Brexit anymore. Woohoo! But, it's not that long ago with Brexit, and there were many things fueling that. And here in the UK, it's like, oh, we want Brexit because we want the foreigners out and whatever. We want our country back to ourselves and whatever. Listen to this, verse 9 of Exodus chapter 23. God says to the people of Israel, who were aliens, foreigners, immigrants in Egypt, and he says this to them: do not oppress the alien, the foreigner, the immigrant, whatever you want to call them, because you yourselves know how it feels to be aliens or immigrants, because you were aliens in Egypt. It's just, God wants us to leave nobody out. It's not about us, it's about looking after others all the time. God wants us to love and care even for those who hurt us, hate us, or we don't like them or don't understand them. This is God's all-encompassing, all-loving, all-merciful, all-forgiving, all-blessing heart. So now I want to come to the verses that this message is all about. Anybody that has been part of Father's House, the church where I am fortunate to be part of the leadership team and the minister there, will probably know what I'm going to say, or anybody that's visited, because we talk about it every week. My favourite subject, discipleship, because I believe it's really important to God. That there is only one mission, and the mission is discipleship, because that mission encompasses everything. And I'm going to come to the famous verses at the end of Matthew 28 in a moment. But I just want us to think about that word mission. We think of mission and missionaries and lots of amazing good being done throughout history and still being done throughout the world by missionaries who travel to sometimes inhospitable places to do good and to show the love of Jesus. There's also been missions that maybe have misrepresented God. So I want us to think about mission and the mission that God has called us to. But I want us to think about it over the next couple of weeks, maybe in a different way. Because I think that maybe we could have misunderstood even this famous passage on mission. And what I want us to do is to take a fresh look at the mission call that is in this passage and re-examine what it means to follow the command, if you will, in this mission, where Jesus says, go out into all the world and make disciples of all nations. Okay, let me read this passage of scripture to you. As I said earlier, those who are part of Father's House will have heard it many, many times. And it's Matthew 28. I'm going to read from verses 16 to 20. So just bear with me as I read this to you. It says, then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. And when they saw him, that's Jesus, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I will be with you always to the very end of the age. So what does it mean to look at that afresh? How can we look at afresh? Some of us have heard this passage so many times, we probably know it off by heart. And maybe you do know it. Maybe you can send me some insight. I'm grateful for any feedback or a different point of view. That's fine. I want to be a learner for the rest of my life until Jesus comes back. But I want to share with you my thoughts today to start this process off, just on these few verses, because if we're talking about following Jesus, this is the passage that really starts it off about discipleship. So it's important that we understand this passage a little bit better. So let's try that now, bit by bit. So we're going to look at 5 things from this passage, just to finish off with today, and then we'll carry on next week. So 5 things. And one of the first things, at the beginning of the passage, it says, the 11 disciples went to Galilee where Jesus had told them to go. And then in verse 17, it says, when they arrived there and when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted, and I don't know if you've ever thought about that, some doubted. Why would they doubt? And here's my thoughts on it. See, in this passage in Matthew, we jump straight from what's happened at the tomb, the resurrection, to this passage here where Jesus is appearing in Galilee sometime later. Now, if you read the other Gospels, Mark, Luke and John, you would know, you could find out that Jesus by this point has already appeared a number of times. Where he appears to them in the upper room and comes through doors and walls, first to the group and then to Thomas. So they've already seen Jesus appear miraculously. He was able to eat with them and Thomas was able to put his fingers through the holes in his hands. And so he was like fully flesh, blood and bones, and yet was spirit and could pass through walls. And I know it's difficult to understand, but that's how the Bible describes it. And yet here it says some doubted. And my thoughts on that are this. It's because Jesus told them to go somewhere where he would meet them. They get there and Jesus is already there. There's no flashing lights. There's no miracle. There's no smoke machines. There's no 10-piece worship band playing excellent songs to introduce him. He's just there, some guy in the middle of nowhere on a mountain. And, I like to think, I have this imagination that some of them get there and think, because it's not an amazing encounter, this can't be God. This is just some guy on a mountain. Is it really Jesus? And some of them began to doubt. And the reason why I say that is, how often can we miss Jesus because he hasn't turned up in the way that we expect him to? We're always looking for the spectacular, the amazing feeling, that moment when so often I find God in the everyday ordinary. You go out for a walk and you'll see the beauty of his creation everywhere and you just praise God. You meet God in people that can change your life and show you the love of Jesus by their behavior, the smile, their love, their generosity. God is around us all the time, and we can so easily miss it when we're chasing the spectacular and we miss the everyday ordinary that God has created and still calls beautiful. The next thing is this. Jesus talks about all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me, and he passes it on to them. What does he mean by that? Go right back to the beginning of the Bible and with the creation story of Adam and Eve. And in Genesis 1:28, please feel free to check this out and read it at home. God is giving them the authority over all creation, and then telling them to be fruitful and to bless the earth with the authority they've been given. So they've been given a mission to be fruitful, to multiply, to take this message further, and the blessing that God has given them to spread that, down through the generations and wherever they can, and so God gives them that authority. And if you know the story, you'll know this. If you don't, God gives them authority. He places them in a place of a tremendous blessing in the Garden of Eden, where they've got everything they want apart from one thing. God says, don't go there. You don't need it. It's not going to help you. But hey, look around you. You've got everything else. You are super blessed. What are we like? We've got so much. And how many of us chase that thing and think, I'll have that, even though we know it's not going to help us, and we can all go down that road of addiction and things like that we know destroys us when we're surrounded by so much good stuff. And that's what happens to Adam and Eve. Whether you believe the story or not, get the point behind the story. They're given all authority, and then the devil comes along, tells them some half-truths, so they sound plausible, some lies mixed in. They believe what the devil says rather than what God says. They're led astray, but in believing the lie, they give power to the liar. I think Bill Johnson from Bethel Church says that, if you believe the lie, you empower the liar, So they're giving their power and their trust over to a liar. So all of a sudden, the authority that they were given, they've given away. They've given away to the devil. And I believe that when Jesus died on the cross and broke the power of sin and death, then was raised to life by the Father, in doing that through his willful obedience, he got that power and authority back. He took it from the devil. And now he's coming back to us as creation, as he did right at the beginning, saying, okay, so it didn't go as planned. Let's start again. This is the heart of God. How many times have I heard God say to me, okay, Des, let's start again. And I think he must be sick of saying it. But it's like so often he says, come on, let's start again. Let's start again. Okay, that didn't work out so good. Let's start again. And here he is with the birth of the church saying, right, I've got back what was lost thousands of years ago. And now I'm giving it back to you and placing it in your trust again to start again. Why would God do that when he could do it himself? Because he loves being in relationship with you and I. How amazing is that? Next thing is this. We're called to go and make disciples. To disciple somebody is to mentor somebody. Perhaps an even better way of describing it is to parent. Parents are people who make disciples. They're mentoring, they're raising their children. They're teaching them, what's right and what's wrong and the best way forward in life because they love them and want the best for them. I think it's a beautiful picture of discipleship is parenting, And since the beginning of creation, this has always been God's plan. It's not just a New Testament thing. It has always been God's plan. God has called us to pass down our knowledge of him as he did to Adam and Eve. Check it out in Genesis, and to tell those that follow on from us of his love, his goodness, his mercy, his forgiveness, and his grace, and how to live the best life. Jesus said, I come so that you can have life and life in all its fullness. He wants not just us to know that, but for us to get that amazing message out to as many people as possible so that they can live in freedom and not in slavery. How great is that, And that's the discipleship bit. It's just passing on this knowledge of an amazing God. Next thing is this. He says, and teach them, everything I've commanded you, to obey everything I've commanded you. So we're to teach people to obey his commands. I think this is an area where we probably messed up a little bit. Because what does that really mean? Well, I'll explain more about this in another message either next week or the week after. It's too big to go into just today. But many people, when they think of Christianity, are turned off straight away because it's all a bunch of rules. Do this, do that, do this, do that. And we miss the point. It's like going back to the Garden of Eden. Why would I want to follow God when he says I can't go to that tree? We're missing the point completely. No, this is the God that said you can go to every other tree, every other plant. You've got all this around you. It's just that one thing. Just that one thing. Don't go there because it's not good for you. And it's perspective, and we think, it's all rules and whatever. It's the rules are there to help us. When you teach your kids, hey, don't run out onto the road, it's not because you want to spoil the fun, it's because you want to save their life. When you understand the heart of God, you begin to understand when he puts boundaries in place, and we've still got free will to disobey those boundaries, but he puts them in place and points us to them and say, I love you too much to see you suffer, or those around you suffer. So I'm putting those boundaries in place and I'm pointing you to them, because if you live by them, you will have the best life and the people around you will have the best life too. So to obey his commands is partly that, but it's not just about rules or boundaries. I really believe teaching people to obey his commands, to do that, we've got to know his heart. If you don't know his heart, you don't know the heart behind the command. If you speak to somebody face to face, and you tell them something, it's very easy face to face to communicate. You can see my gestures, my body language, all of that. If I send that same message by email or text or social media, you could completely misread what I mean. Has that ever happened to you? It's certainly happened to me. And this is why it's so important. We've got it in black and white in the Bible, but if we miss the heart, if we miss the face, the love behind what Jesus is saying, it can come out the wrong way. And I believe we've been doing this for thousands of years. And unless we can understand the heart of God, we'll put people off by miscommunicating. What we're saying is right, the way we're saying it is wrong, is perhaps what I'm trying to say. Final thing is this. He says he will always be with us. We don't have to be alone. It's the gift of relationship. This is not a distant God. This is a God that wants to be with us. Not a God that wants to be with us, like with a cattle prod, point us back in the right direction. No, remember, this is the God, as David said, that when I mess up, him being with me will be there to lift me out of the mud and the mess that I've got myself into and set my feet on the rock again, says, okay, come on, let's start again. So this is a God that's saying, look, yes, I'm giving you a mission. Yes, I'm giving you commands, but I'm going to be with you in this. You're not alone. I'm going to be with you in this. So this amazing journey that you have no idea what it's going to look like, except know this, it is amazing. It's just, I can't recommend it enough. But if you're even just at the beginning of the path or slightly along it and it's not looking so good for now, I want to tell you it gets better and better. Yes, there will be trouble. You can't get away from that. But hey, God will be with you through this. God promises to be with you on this journey. If you choose to follow him, he promises to be with you as we go and make disciples in his name, because there is no better place to lead people than to Jesus and his kingdom. So in the next few weeks, we're going to look a little bit more at this and what discipleship really means, because I don't think we've fully understood that, and what the teachings of Jesus really mean, and how we can better understand them to live by them better. So I look forward to seeing you next week. Please send in your questions or messages, your encouragement. Even if you disagree, that's okay. That's okay. Who says I've got all the answers? It's great to hear from you. So be blessed. Pray that you'll be blessed. Pray that you'll stay safe. If any of you out there are sick, pray that God will heal you, that you'll know his love and his provision at this time of challenging circumstances. God bless you. Bye. Have you started? I missed that bit.